Hey everybody, Marcus here, Gen Xer and philosopher. So today I want to talk about the Gen Z concept of cringe. Now that's a very interesting concept because it's quite prevalent within the Gen Z community. I mean, it's a word that's being thrown around with the same intensity and force as Gen X and the millennials would use say the word cool. So it's not an arbitrary word, and it really does need a little bit of focus on trying to identify its mechanics and how it works. Now, we're going to watch a video as part of this video, and I'm going to do some commentary on it. This video we're going to watch is entitled Congratulations, You Have No Personality. It got almost 1 million views. It was made by a Gen Z woman who I think has a lot of interesting points to bring up. But beyond her points, it's really her relationship with the word cringe that's of interest to us in watching this video. But before we dive into the video, I wanted to explore the concept of cringe and how I juxtapose it against the concept of cool, because both of these words have that generational force behind them. They have a way of shaping the people who use that word. Now, I know growing up in the 80s and 90s is that you want it to be cool. You not only want it to be cool, but you kept an eye out for things that were cool, markers of coolness. Now, cool is a positive word, meaning that you were looking for something positive within the world. So you had that glass half full sort of mentality. And by calling something cool, you were elevating it, you were making it aspirational. So playing the guitar, for example, in the 90s was cool because, well, the legacy from the 80s, but also Kurt Cobain with the grunge movement. So if you were to play the guitar in the 90s, when playing guitar was cool, you would have a form of social proof. So cool things gave you a direction of striving towards social acceptance, because ultimately, if you're cool, that means social acceptance, and everybody wanted that. Cringe doesn't work like that. Cringe is a negative mindset because you're not looking for positive things to elevate, you're looking for negative things. So you're looking at that glass half empty sort of mentality to belittle and reduce something out in the real world. And if you're doing that, that doesn't give you anything to aspire to, because a negation is not a direction that you can work towards. All it means is a direction at best that you can move away from. So Gen Z seem to be constructing the world in this negative perception, and they have no direction because they don't carry a positive concept as their dominant concept of judging objects, activities, and people within the world. I mean, cringe and cool are both used in the same sense. I mean, they're both used to label people, activities, and things. Things are cool, people are cool. Cringe as well. I mean, I think it's really on the activity side where that cringe aspect shows up. But still, people are labeled cringe really by their behavior. So what I'm trying to say here is that when you label any number of items as cringe, all you've really done is identified things you should not be striving towards, because ultimately cringe is undesirable. You do not wish to be cringe. Therefore, you will not perform cringe actions. But it doesn't tell you what you ought to do. Like, it doesn't tell you what will make you cool, because that's not the dominant concept. So moving away from one object of cringe. So for example, let's say the guitar. If playing the guitar today is cringe, and you accept that, that means if you learn to play the guitar, you will be cringe. That means you don't want to do that. But what do you want to do instead? Are you going to learn the flute? Because moving away from playing the guitar towards something else does not mean you're moving away from cringe in the aggregate. You might be moving away from one form of cringe towards another form of cringe. But that doesn't exist with the concept of cool. No matter what you move towards, no matter what was cool. I mean, we're not going to get into the details of, drugs were cool in some circles and things like that, because we're really exploring the power of the concept itself. With cool things, moving towards anything cool would give you status within a certain hierarchy. And that hierarchy was constituted of the people who also identified that object as cool. So, for example, music, any form of music, any type, any genre of music. Some people thought metal was cool. one of these people. I thought metal was cool. So I opted into the hierarchy of metalheads, all these people who identified metal as cool. And then you knew kind of how to raise your rank within that hierarchy because the ultimate holder of the coolest status of all was a rock star. So a lot of people would mimic rock stars, which meant you had a uniform you could strive towards. You could grow out your hair, wear a leather jacket, get patches, maybe tattoos, though tattoos weren't really that big of a deal in the 80s and 90s in that community. But you had to usually learn an instrument, and the dominant instrument was the guitar, or you sang. So you had these goals on how you can elevate your own status within your hierarchy in a positive manner. And the thing about it is that there were obviously communities that thought metal was not cool, but you never really operated with that concept of not cool. You weren't looking for not cool things. In fact, things tended to be either cool or neutral. So when you're scanning ambiently in the real world, registering what's going on, things that were cool would pop out at you, but things that didn't pop out at you weren't uncool. They were just there. Like tying your shoes was neither cool nor uncool. It just didn't register in your consciousness. Anyways, there were a variety of hierarchies that would form around the concept of cool. Metal being cool, one hierarchy. Rap being cool, another hierarchy, which had its own rules. And I remember in the 80s, well, in the 90s specifically, but this probably was true in the 80s, was that within the metal community, you had an enemy, and one of those enemies was rap music. So rap was antithetical to being a metalhead. You were not allowed to listen to rap if you were a metalhead. It doesn't matter why, what the reasons were. It was just rules of the group. But those that were into rap weren't necessarily uncool. You just didn't gravitate towards that. But they thought that rap was cool, and all of that culture that revolves around rap, because it does have a culture, rap, hip hop, Tupac, the whole, in the 90s, the whole gang aesthetic that went along with it. That was also aspirational, maybe not as positively aspirational as, say, being a rock star, but it gave direction to people into rap music. It gave them a way of deciding of how to dress, what to listen to, where to go to, in order to raise their ranks within their own respective hierarchy. Now, that's what I'm trying to point out with the concept of cool, is that antithetical hierarchies can form, one against the other, meaning that metal was antithetical to rap, rap was antithetical to metal, at least perceptually, and yet both could be cool within their respective groups. So it was the same, say, in high school. You had the clique that thought that sports were cool, and you had the nerds that thought that chess was cool. And so you could always find a place to be cool in, a hierarchy you could belong into, because you were organizing yourself against a positive direction, which had its own rules. So that's kind of how cool operated. Cringe doesn't do that. Cringe doesn't give you anything aspirational, and it doesn't create any hierarchies. I don't think people group together in Gen Z around their mutual cringe against the subject. It doesn't create any form of unity. And that's a very big difference here. The negativity of the need for negatively perceiving the world when using the operative word as cringe, the complete lack of clarity of what one ought to aspire towards, because cringe doesn't give you direction, and the risk that if you move in any direction, you may be moving towards something else that's cringe, which kind of stagnates you. It makes you do nothing, because doing nothing is probably the safest thing you can do. If you're not cringe in the moment, that means doing nothing will mean you stay not cringe. I don't know. That's how I'm kind of reading into this, to this use of the word, the way that Gen Z use it. Now, I know that they use it in an ironic sense in a way, and that whole word irony, as Gen Z use it, also is its own little can of worms, because there's no irony about anything they call ironic. Really, the word itself is used as sarcasm, I believe. And sarcasm usually is a marker of someone that's insecure about themselves. Sarcastic humor can be funny when it's contained to the context of the joke and scope of the joke in a time-boxed manner in which it's told, and then you move on to being less sarcastic, more serious, where your words actually mean what you know, what words mean. But yeah, I think that makes sense. The insecurity aspect of it around irony, cringe being a negative term, it's all in that whole bubble of negativity that existed. But anyways, I want to preamble with that. Let's start with the video, now I'll comment throughout.
The other day, my friend asked me to compete at my school's K-pop dance competition in Monster High cosplay. My immediate response to this was, that's a little cringe. I mean, does anyone else feel like it's become embarrassing to do or like things nowadays? Talking has become yapping, doing anything is side-eye or it's not that deep, and it's led to us all becoming, simply put, incredibly boring.
He took a skateboarding class as an adult, and I was like, okay, that should be illegal.
Like, what are your hobbies? I don't know, texting?
And as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at hiding my cringe interests. My anime fan art no longer sees the light of day, I haven't touched my tab shoes since high school, I now quietly enjoy musical theater, and why should my K-pop phase be any different? I could just enjoy it quietly in shame, like a happy person. I mean, did my friend really expect me to subject myself to the cringe of putting on a Monster High cosplay and K-pop dance in front of my— if this was a sitcom, this would be the part where it cuts to me doing exactly that. Yes, I did the dance, and to understand why, please join me on a journey as we answer the age-old question, fellas, is it cringe to have a personality?
Okay, so you can really see the sarcasm happening in it, because she's clearly doing the things and displaying them on camera, which she's also labeling cringe. So it's almost like the sarcasm is a defense mechanism, which usually is what sarcasm is, a defense mechanism over insecurity. So she's doing things that other people have labeled cringe, so she's not allowed to like them in an open manner. She has to hide it behind sarcasm, which she would call irony, I guess. The nefarious Gen Z irony. And the very fact that you have to answer the question of whether or not it's cringe to have a personality is just weird. It's just absolutely weird.
But hello, if you're new here, my name is Doothy, I do commentary, I tuft rugs, so sit back, relax, lock in perhaps. But that TikTok of that girl being mad about an adult learning how to skateboard has been haunting me since I saw it. I think this speaks to a larger problem within our generation, more specifically that no one has hobbies or does things anymore. And I don't know if anyone else feels this way. It kind of feels like the average hobby of 2024 is just consumption-based, binge-watching Netflix, doom-scrolling on TikTok for 3 hours, reading spicy mafia book talk books, and buying cute things at Target. Now, I don't blame the average person for being somewhat averse to picking up a new skill or doing things, because online culture has gotten, simply put, so mean that anyone trying to pursue something or try something new or make something is deemed cringe and extra. Beyond cringe culture in this video, I want to focus on our collective doing too much culture and our need to humble one another. Even the language we use online further facilitates this way of thinking. Like I mentioned earlier, speaking passionately about your interests is met with "take it to Yappersville" or "bro is tweaking." Comments like "it's not that deep, the world kept spinning." Even the weaponization of the nerd emoji, which I know sounds like a stretch, but I feel like
Crabs in a bucket. It's a lot of crabs in a bucket mentality. If you're striving towards anything, that's absolutely fantastic, and you ought to be doing that. In fact, I don't like some of the framing that this woman puts in, even on the positive side, because she talks about hobbies as if they're somehow separate from life itself. Like you have life, then you have your hobbies. And somehow there's a distinction between your state of being and the hobbies you have, because they're hobbies. It's like the word hobby labels it external to your own sense of being. Personally, I don't call anything that I do really a hobby. I think the way the term used to be used back, well, I guess prior to Gen Z's adoption of it, is something that you do that is not your job. That's all really a hobby meant. It was you do it as a hobby or you do it professionally. That was really the only distinction. But hobbies, as an aggregate, are an extension of your personality. You do things because they pull something out of you. You're compelled to do them. You don't do them because you need a hobby. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You're a complete person that wants to interact with the world. I mean, Nietzsche had this concept of the will to power. Now, people assume the will to power is an indicator of power over other people, power in politics, power through money. It's not it at all. What Nietzsche was referring to is the will to exert one's will upon the world, which has nothing to do with other people, politics, or anything else. The very desire to, for example, learn to walk is an example of the will to power. You wish to dominate nature in the sense of elevating your own body and being able to cross the room on your two legs. It's a will to power, to bend it to your will, and specifically being your own body in that example, to bend your body to your will, to bring it over from one place to another. The same thing with changing our environment. Decorating your room is an example of the will to power. So hobbies are kind of that. They're an exertion of the will to power through a specific craft that's tailored to the nature of the person who is exhibiting that will to power. So the hobbies you would have really are, again, an extension of your personality. And to not have any hobbies is just an indicator that you're suppressing something. It's not that you have no interest, it's that you're suppressing something within yourself, because of course you have interest. Of course there's stuff you want to do. It doesn't make sense to me, a human being that doesn't want to do anything. I think you have to like beat the humanity and the soul out of somebody for them to have pushed out of their conscious awareness their internal desires. Because as a child, you know what you want to do. Like, you just do it. That's literally what children do. They act on impulse. They don't even think about it. They don't think about playing as a hobby, or they like Lego or toy cars or Barbie dolls. It's just, you like it, you go do. You have no thought whatsoever around how to catalog it, how to categorize it. You just engage with the world. Same thing with creation of art. Children engage in art like all the time. They paint, they draw, they make sounds. If they see a musical instrument or someone playing it, I mean, they'll bang on things as well. They want to stimulate the senses through some sort of exertion of their will. And then to get to adult life, and you find yourself with no quote-unquote hobbies, means you had to beat out of yourself your will to do anything, because you as a child had hobbies. You didn't call them that. They were just things you wanted to do. And somehow that had to be suppressed for one reason or another. And I think the concept of cringe plays into that. I mean, I don't know what came first, the suppression or the word, but nonetheless, they pair well together with each other. Because if you grow up in an environment where attempting anything, it doesn't matter what, is punished through this shame-inducing concept like cringe by somebody else, which suggests social ostracism at the tail end of it, then yeah, of course you're going to repress doing anything. You may really want to do something, but you don't want anybody finding out you're doing it. You don't want to be seen doing it because it has social cost. And if it has social cost, that means it's socially manufactured and socially enforced. So it has to be part of the environment, part of the culture, because it's not natural for a human being not to want to do stuff and not to know what that is, because it should have flowed out of them during childhood and just continued into adulthood.
We have this need to subtly find ways to embarrass and bully people who actually have things they want to say. Like, high school is a microcosm for society, and we've literally made it the norm again to just call people nerds to bully them. And I'm also well aware that complaining about the nerd emoji is giving
Those hidden, I'm competing against this horrible emoji.
And I'm guilty of this too. In my videos, I use the nerd emoji and refer to myself as a yapper to shield myself from criticism. And if we fall into the habit of constantly referring to ourselves as nerds or yapsters, or using ironic voices when talking about something you're passionate about, we almost start to preemptively stop ourselves from being outwardly passionate or thinking deeper about things and just doing stuff and expressing yourself. Again, I'm using this ironic voice because it feels cringe to say that.
It's not irony, it's sarcasm. You got to get your terms straight. You can't just invent these words. And the reason you can't just invent these words or redefine them is because you're robbing yourself of the history of the word. If there's literature written on the concept of sarcasm and you start using a word like irony, you're never going to encounter that literature, because now you've replaced the substantive meaning of the word irony with what was historically the substantive meaning of the word sarcasm. And that'll just lead you astray. So sarcasm is what she's talking about.
Matt Lawrence had a really interesting video on this topic, and he explained that Gen Z has this growing aversion to passion and knowledge. Like, being too into something or too excited about something is seen as doing too much. Like, it might be more socially acceptable to casually like theater, for example, but it starts to become more and more socially unacceptable the more into it you are. Now, I'm gonna bring up a YouTuber that I seldom mention on this channel. Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Anthro had this video on how to like anime and be normal about it, and in the video he had a spectrum of what a normal anime fan was. And Curtis Connor also made a similar spectrum for Disney adults, where he explained if you watch a Disney movie or two, you're still in the fine, chill category, but once you start getting tattoos and going to the parks, it's no longer the socially acceptable amount of liking something. And of course, this begs the question, what does it mean to like something a normal amount? And should we always have to? And this question has been somewhat haunting me, and is part of the reason I'm hesitant to join my school's K-pop dance club. Because at what point do I veer away from being someone who just casually enjoys K-pop to a cringe fanatic? A barrier I probably passed a long time ago when I threw a parasocial birthday party for Mark Lee in broad daylight, but I imagine the spectrum for a K-pop fan looks something like this, with someone who doesn't know anything about K-pop on the extreme left, someone who casually listens to the songs in the middle, but what lies on the right of this diagram? The zone of the overzealous. At what point do you cross that barrier into the doing too much category? Is it hanging up posters, collecting photo cards, learning the dances? And even if I was in this fanatic zone of doing too much, I could be a fanatic in silence and shame. Again, like a happy person. I also feel like this doing too much trend leaves people hesitant to do things now and fear of being cringe in the future. Every year I feel like some variation of this trend comes out where people are thankful that they never had embarrassing or cringy phases in their past. No theater phase, they never tried learning Japanese because they liked anime. And I feel like we're collectively becoming so scared and ashamed of having a personality and doing and liking things in our past. While trying to maintain this false air of no one cares, everyone's chill, nonchalance, Gen Z has ironically become the most chalant-ass generation to exist. Like, we want to...
A lot of things going on in this video so far I want to comment on. There seems to be an area where social ostracism has become particularly inflamed as a fear factor in Gen Z. I don't know what it is. Maybe because it's more difficult for Gen Z to actually make friendships, that the cost of losing a friendship or being ostracized from the group you do have is much heavier of a burden to bear than it was for, I don't know, my generation, Gen X, or even millennials, because you had a lot of friends and they were kind of different to each other, and you weren't really pushed away by being, a little different, by deviating. So even though I said I was into metal and then rap was antithetical, I had friends that listened to rap because we just made fun of each other about the music. That was kind of a bonding element in our friendship. Now, if there's a higher weight attributed to a friend now, then losing them becomes more of a desperate plea to control one's own behavior so that you don't lose it. So there's something in it there, I think, that we need to look at.
Uphold this performative and chill vibe, so we stop ourselves and shame others from being passionate or trying. And it sucks because I think the hobby is born from two things: liking something a lot and wanting to do something about it. My Hamilton phase led to my theater career, my anime phase led me to draw more in high school, some pieces better than others. And I'm sure you guys have noticed that people who are into K-pop, they sure like to dance to K-pop. But
another thing that I just remembered based on this passage, this segment, is not wanting to do things today so you don't come across as cringe in the future. That's only a concept that really can exist when you have the internet and the internet is forever. Because historically, there was no evidence that you were cringe in the past. Even like a home video on a cassette, I mean, no one was digging that up. There was no chance of public display of any of this stuff. Your life was basically reset at a few different instances during your time growing up. Your life was reset if you changed schools. Your life was reset typically when you went to university because you didn't go with the old historical crew that you went to high school with or elementary school with, and you may have gone at different times. So You got this opportunity to reinvent yourself with a blank slate because there was no evidence haunting you from the past. Now with the internet, yeah, things can be forever. People still got to dig it up, but there exists some form of evidence. So I can kind of appreciate not wanting to generate evidence of things so that maybe it doesn't haunt you in the future. But at the same time, one ought not limit oneself to activities in the present governed by this sort of fear, because you can't predict what a future culture, how a future culture will assess the things you've done in your past. It may turn out to be the case that the things that were cringe in the past become really cool in the future, or not cringe. I don't know what the Gen Z equivalent of the opposite of cringe is. Do you guys still use cool? I don't know. Leave a comment. But yeah, there's huge overtones here of modern culture affecting the thinking here.
We're creating a culture where both of those things, liking something a lot and wanting to do something, are discouraged. Like, this girl on TikTok tried starting her own K-pop entertainment company, and she was immediately shut down and met with a swarm of hate calling her delusional and cringe and doing too much. I'm sure you all have heard the crabs in a bucket metaphor, but if you haven't, essentially when crabs are in a bucket and one crab tries to escape, the other crabs will pull it back down for genuinely no reason or gain to themselves. Doothy, try making a video that isn't a convoluted metaphor for cringe challenge, go level impossible. But our need to humble each other or drag other crabs back into the bucket, so to speak, is something I think we do to uphold that status quo of being chill and detached. When someone tries to escape the bucket by showing a deep passion, being overly authentic or ambitious, it's met with humbling. And if all
It's meant with resentment. That's what it's meant with. People keep other people down not because they're trying to really protect them from anything, to humble them of whatnot, because we got to get into Aristotle here for a second. So humility is a virtue, and by Aristotelian standards, that means it's the golden mean between an excess and a deficiency. The excess would be pride, and the deficiency would be what's referred to as false humility. So people don't talk about false humility. I don't think they even operate with this concept, but exists. False humility is downplaying your achievements. If you're a rock star and you call yourself a rock star, you are not being prideful. You are being humble because you are correctly representing yourself the way you actually are. When you overrepresent yourself, you're being boastful and prideful. And when you're underrepresenting yourself, you're exhibiting a form of false humility. So this crabs in a bucket aspect that she's referring to is a consequence of resentment. When people take offense by the excellence of others, by the virtues of others. And this is my theory on why Jesus was killed, honestly. Jesus wasn't going around doing bad things to people. In fact, he was going around doing good things, making other people who thought themselves good look bad by contrast. And that's usually what it is. People that strive and have passion exert this radiant magnetic energy towards them. You want to be around them. And it's obvious to see. I mean, when you get excited, people listen, they tune into it. I mean, there must be something in it. And it's attractive. It's positive. It's attractive. It's a very cool experience to see someone super excited about something, super knowledgeable about it, into it. Regardless of the subject, you don't even need to care about the subject. Just witnessing their passion is great. And that gains social approval. And then, of course, being passionate means that you're probably going to spend a great deal of time with the subject matter, whatever it may be. Like if it's a hobby of consumption, like even watching Star Trek or whatnot, you're going to know a lot about Star Trek. I mean, how you can translate that to something useful, I don't know necessarily, but you could probably translate it somehow because there definitely is a commercial dimension because there's a lot of Star Trek fans. So regardless of that, but you're going to spend a lot of time with the subject matter, so you're going to grow this in-depth knowledge, which may serve in your favor in one form or another. Because if you're also capable of wrapping around that subject matter, even if it's Star Trek, in a rhetorically pleasing manner, people will listen to you about, the details of how this episode of The Next Generation was shot. I mean, that stuff is interesting if someone competent explains it to an observer that has no interest in a fascinating manner. So that's really what it's about. But beyond consumption hobbies, constructive, creative hobbies, creative activities, anything that requires skill that's cultivated across time, which leads towards mastery and the ability to create things that are outside the immediate ability of creation of somebody else, those are intimidating. I mean, playing the guitar is impressive. I mean, I play the guitar and I know when people are impressed, not because, well, I'm a good guitar player, but you only have to be a little bit better than a beginner in order to be impressive on the guitar to someone who doesn't play the guitar. You don't have to be a virtuoso to be impressive. In fact, there's a certain distance and skill in the instrument that once you reach that level of competence, everything past that point is only really observable and impressive to another guitar player that actually knows the craft. To a layman, it all looks the same. So there's like this upper limit of potential impressiveness you can achieve with the general public. And after that point, it's all about showing off to fellow guitar players, fellow musicians. It's like that with a lot of crafts. But being impressive in something intimidates someone who's not impressive in anything. So people can be jealous of the achievements of others in areas that they have no interest in. And I remember this being something even I experienced a very, very long time ago, where I was jealous of a girl that had a publishing deal at a relatively young age, even though I had no aspiration of being a writer myself. And it wasn't because, it wasn't really because I wanted to be a writer, because I had no motivation towards that area. It was because she was achieving something, and I felt I wasn't achieving anything for myself in whatever it is that I was pursuing. It was offensive in some weird, insecurity-inducing way. It made me feel bad to watch someone succeed because I wasn't succeeding in my own mind over the things I was doing. And so humbling people, as this woman in this video is describing, is really just a nice wrapper language around saying, you make me feel insecure because you're achieving something. That stop being good at stuff because you're making me feel bad. That's all it means.
The crabs in the bucket, again, this is a metaphor for society. Stick with me, please. If all the crabs in the bucket try to uphold this social norm of being nonchalant, chill, and not caring about anything, we create a culture where only the most boring, lukewarm, socially neutral ideas can thrive. Stuck in a bucket of boring where no one does anything except act chill and call each other out for doing too much. Because for something to have mass appeal and be widely socially accepted, it needs to be tame enough to appeal to the chill-ass NPC crabs.
To the mediocre. It has to be mediocrity. It has to be something that you can pick up in a week or something that's non-offensive. As in, you can learn a new recipe, but you can't become a chef, right? Because that new recipe, the person that witnesses you achieve that can think to themselves, yeah, they read a recipe off the internet, I could recreate that too. So there's nothing offensive going on here because there isn't some grandiose investment of time required to get the results that this person is displaying. It's all mediocrity. This whole chill thing really sounds to me like the culture in Gen Z aspires to mediocrity, and anyone trying to get out of that is fundamentally generating bad vibes, as I put it, because nothing so far that's been mentioned in this video has brought up the opposite case, the case in which someone underperforms, because people that fail don't offend, because failure doesn't offend. In fact, failure of somebody else is pleasing because you can feel good about yourself because they're failing. In fact, you do witness a lot of this activity that people like seeing you fail. So here's a pro tip in life. If you want to appeal to people, you want to get on their good side, fail in front of them, fail publicly. Bring yourself down in that sense, not intentionally, but say attempt something you know you're not particularly good at so that they witness you fail. They'll like you more. You'll become more human. especially if you have a lot of competencies in any other subject matter. Don't downplay your competencies, but every now and then potentially fail in front of people. They'll like you.
You will. Pardon my highly academic terminology. Take that, AI, the writer still got it, ladies and gentlemen. And I guess in defense of humbling someone, things that are passionate, extreme, and overzealous require additional social effort to process and understand, so humbling someone is a lot easier than trying to understand why they like this weird thing so much, or have this ambition that you can't even imagine pursuing yourself. I also can't blame the metaphorical crabs for behaving in self-interest because, let's be real, they're a little shellfish. I noticed that I didn't have a lot of jokes in this video while writing the script, so I googled crab puns. We like to break the fourth wall here on the Doothy channel. This is a little look into my creative process. AI is going to replace writers. And we see the same thing happen with people who make, did I just make the song of the summer TikToks? We mock them exactly the way I just did because we almost find the act of trying or having an ambition to be inherently embarrassing. Okay, so now I need to explain how I ended up K-pop dancing in Monster High cosplay. But as the day of the performance neared, I remember this comment I got on my last video to the effect of, y'all can be cringe and free all you want, but expect us to make fun of you. Now my immediate reaction to this comment was to delete it because the Doothy channel is a dictatorship, not a democracy, okay? Make no mistake. But I also realized that this person had a point.
You know, what's interesting is that it's actually a lot harder to get ridiculed than one might think. So striving for something great is actually not as risk-prone towards ridicule as one would suspect. Now, I don't reside online in the areas, I suppose, where Gen Z reside. However, I do know that based upon music, for example, a lot of people fear ridicule when they start producing music, start writing songs and then recording them and releasing them. But you know what? There's very little danger of that happening because when people don't like your work, they're not going to exert the energy to type out a comment that they don't like it. It's not going to happen. In fact, there's no reason for them to type out that comment because there's no audience for them to seem cool in front of. And this is what I mean. Celebrities get a lot of criticism because let's say a celebrity puts out some sort of YouTube video, whatever it may be, a song. Pop artist puts out a new single. What you're going to see in the comments sections is the fanboys praising it unconditionally. Some people saying something akin to a nuanced comment of, oh yeah, it's not bad, but you know, this was better, whatever. And then you're going to get all the haters. Now the thing about the haters is why they post those comments to begin with is because there's a lot of people commenting, meaning someone might actually read that comment. That's the only reason to post. You already need to have authority in order for haters to even engage with you. But when you're first starting something out and you're posting your new creations, you say you know, you produce a song as a bedroom artist, you know, as your first attempt. You're going to put it out on YouTube. First of all, the algorithm will most likely not even seed it out. So the impression rate you're going to get is negligible, 20, 50, 100. If you get 1,000 impressions by the grace of YouTube's generosity, then that'll be big. Now, in order for that criticism to manifest, someone has to not only be displayed that impression, they have to click on the video, meaning that your thumbnail better be on point. Otherwise, they haven't even experienced your song. When they click into your song, they're going to probably judge the genre and the style it's in within the first 5 to 10 seconds and click away, meaning that they've heard nothing of your work to begin with to even warrant criticism. They're just going to move away. In fact, the only way you're going to get criticism from somebody at that stage is that they have to be shown your video, they have to click on it, they have to watch it long enough so that you somehow manage in your song to evoke enough of a disgust reflex in them for them to be compelled to actually type something negative when there's literally 0 comments and like 3 views on your video. It's too much effort to criticize somebody who has nothing because it's just a waste of your time, ultimately. So that's why you don't really get any criticism as somebody just aspiring. And even if you do, it might be like 1 comment because how many views are you going to get? Very little. So yeah, you got to work. You got to work to get criticism. I know in my musical journey, I mean, at first you have that fear, then you release stuff, and then you realize the reality is that no one cares. No one cares. They don't care even enough to criticize you. In fact, then you start getting angry. You try to motivate people to actually go see it. You think to yourself, maybe if they're criticizing, they're at least stating that they watched enough of it to find something they don't like, which already makes you happy because, you had to listen to at least half my song, which already makes you feel good that people are listening to your music, even if they hate it. So in some sense, when you start putting yourself out there, you start to realize hate is a positive thing. Hate means you're acquiring authority and status because now you're important enough to even leave hateful comments for. Just a side.
Was I staying in the metaphorical bucket because the other metaphorical crabs? Okay, I'm gonna drop the crab analogy, if you will. But I was confronted with two options. I could either be cringe or boring. So I donned the Jackie Laura cosplay. My friend painted herself blue because that's something that she wanted to do for some reason, and I did the dance.
Performing really did help me with my confidence because up until now I have been held back so much from just doing things that some people could consider cringy. I feel like I'm doing too much at that point.
Yeah.
And it's I'm already listening to the music. I consume the media. Who am I trying to be is the thought process in my head. Why can't I just enjoy it to the extent that I want to enjoy it and not to the extent that society tells me it's okay to enjoy?
But leading up to this performance, a comment kept playing in my head under a video of people dancing to K-pop in public. We can't praise talentless, sloppy swaying. But now that I was the one sloppily swaying, it's not easy to put your heart into mediocrity.
And then I took all the shame that I felt at having even been associated with something so cringy and projected it onto them and been like, oh, people are going to look down on them for performing on stage, not knowing that it takes real courage to not care about any of those things. And now that it was me...
It takes habituation to not care. I got to say, not caring is the act of thoughts of others don't even appear to you, meaning that not caring is not an active activity, it's a passive activity. When you don't care, that means the opinions of others don't even enter your thought process to make a decision on. So when you're deciding to put out your art, it never occurred to you that, maybe you shouldn't because somebody will look crooked at it. It's not a thought that goes into your mind. In fact, the considerations that go into your mind are around, is it discoverable? Am I going to market it correctly? If it's a YouTube video, is the thumbnail good? Is the title good? Do I have the description correct? These are the things that enter your mind, not whether or not anybody's going to click on it or judge it or anything like that. So being indifferent to indifferent things is important, which is literally the basis of not caring in an actual spiritual exercise. And being indifferent, you know what that means. But indifferent things means things that are outside of your power to control. You can't control other people. You should be indifferent to them in that sort of sense. Their opinions are their own, and you can't change them. Because no matter what you produce, you're going to find somebody that undoubtedly likes it and find somebody that undoubtedly hates it. It's like that with pretty much anything. I mean, I keep going back to music because I'm involved in that, but there's albums I listened to back from 20, 25 years ago that were demo tapes by bands that never really even took off the ground. They just threw out their demo album onto the internet back, say, in 2000, 2001, prior to YouTube. And I somehow discovered their music and I really loved it. And to me, this was just a band I've never heard of before whose music I really loved. And listening to those albums today, which I still do, I can see how bad the productions are now only because I'm into music production. But that still doesn't stop me from listening to them because I don't care. I don't care. It has a quirk to it, a niceness to it. There's bands that did put out music back in their early time, self-made albums, that did make it and produce, spectacular productions later down in their career. Now, when you look at their old work, the stuff that they produced themselves, production-wise horrific, but it's more honest. It's like you hear the trying more because they are trying. You hear the hunger in them. So I love the early work, even though it's like bad from even the craftsmanship side, a writing side. The lyrics sometimes are ridiculous. The performances are questionable, but I still love them because they're inspirational in a sense. They show a progression, they show a journey, so nothing's wasted. Nothing's wasted. And if you're not producing anything for your own posterity's sake, your own ability to reflect back from the future back upon your life up to that moment, that you're going to have regrets. You're going to have regrets because the things that you think are crap today, you're going to look back 20 years down at as keepsakes of the history of your life. And that's far more important than whether or not it was popular or not. It's going to anchor you into a moment in time in your own life.
I'm so glad I did it now. And even if I was painted blue.
And this video is dedicated to giving massive praise to any sloppy sway. Okay, I'm not gonna. But get a hobby, nerd out over something, make a cosplay, do the dance, leave the bucket. Because maybe you'll end up going professional, or maybe you'll just have a nice, mediocre K-pop performance to look back on. My last video kind of popped off, to be frank, and I was rushing to make a part 2 and talk about other TikTok creators, but the day the Doothy channel turns into a TikTok drama channel is the day you guys...
Okay, so this video kind of goes off for the next 30 seconds or so on some other commentary, but cringe, cool. This is what we started with. We've reviewed of how this is being spoken of in this video, and all I gotta say to Gen Z, to you guys watching out there, to you watching this video, don't worry yourself about the opinions of others, because those people, odds are good, are not going to exist in your life very long. This is very common advice. It's not original coming from me. Think about why you care, and specifically the emotional side, because that's really all it's about. It's about managing internal emotions. When you stop caring, that means you stay neutral emotionally, ultimately, regardless of the outcome. I put out a variety of things in music, things beyond music, and I show them to people, not really because I want their reaction, because I couldn't care less. I have certain obligations to show things to people. That be like, my friends get offended if I don't send them my latest song or things like that. Like, I don't really care what they think, because either a positive or negative opinion in either way isn't going to sway my progression on the craft itself. It's really going to be a confession of them and what, I don't know, they were experiencing internally as a consequence to it, which isn't relevant because it's not statistically significant. My friends may hate it. A large group of people may love it. You know, you never know. But produce for the sake of producing, because it's an expression of self, it's an expression of the will, and it's a cultivation of excellence over time, which is going to give you a sense of confidence as you progress out in life. Because when you master one skill, you've gone the whole journey of sucking at something, being mediocre at it, to being kind of okay at it, being to kind of impressive at it, being to impressive at it even in your field, being to, you know, to a mastery level that may not be world class, but it's fairly high up there. When you've seen and experienced the emotional journey of doing this for one thing, you start to realize you could do this for other things. And you start to realize where you made the mistakes along this journey's sake. And the big one is actually fearing the emotional journey going forward, because you don't want to feel bad. Therefore, you find ways of sabotaging yourself. So forget the audience. Create. In fact, anytime you create anything or engage in the pursuit of anything, imagine it without an audience. If you want to do art with no intention of showing it to people. Then eventually, once it's sat on a shelf for a while, show it to people. Don't worry about what they're going to think or whatnot, but create anyways. Because if you create long enough, even in secret, you'll eventually get past these points of mediocrity and start producing excellence. So this is why you get a lot of these examples of, you know, people being insecure about their art, but they've been doing it for like 10 years. And then someone sees it's like, wow, you are amazing. It's like, really? It's like, yeah, because you've been doing it for 10 years. That's why. So imagine you're going to suck. I'll give you a loose timeline to work with. If you commit yourself to anything, you're going to suck at it for about 2 to 3 years. then you're going to get to the sense of impressive mediocrity where you can't necessarily be positioned as a complete amateur but not really a professional. And then by the 5-year mark or so, you're going to start to get to that level of mastery if you stick to it. So that's your timeline. Give something 5 years of concerted effort towards, don't worry, no one's going to be cringing at this stuff. In fact, the only people who can potentially say anything negative, you can then identify as just being insecure and not really being people you want to associate with to begin with. In your immediate social circle. I mean, strangers on the internet, nobody cares what they think anyways. So yeah, cringe as a word, honestly, I don't think it's serving you guys at all. I think because of its negative overtone, it's a limiting concept, the way it's used. I think readopting the word cool is probably going to serve you better because it served my generation quite well because it gave us direction. So maybe take up that positive mindset is forget about all the cringe stuff and start looking for things that are cool and start throwing that word around a little bit. Maybe it'll catch on with Gen Z. Maybe not. I don't know. But I hope this was informational. Thanks for listening. Go team.